Tonight, in this edition of the 6 p.m. newscast on Equinox Television, the March session of the National Assembly and also the Senate opened today in the nation's capital, Yaoundé. The eldest member of parliament instructed his fellow MPs to show proof of responsibility during the election of the new bureau. And the UPC political party, which is occupying just 3 seats at the National Assembly, is demanding a representation in the new bureau. We talk about a fatal road accident which occurred in the southwest region of the country in the early hours of this morning, which claimed the life of a 64-year-old man. Good evening to you, ladies and gentlemen. You are watching the 6 p.m. newscast on Equinox Television. We begin right here in the nation's capital, Yaoundé. The eldest member of parliament has called on MPs to exercise tolerance, live in harmony, and put hands on deck for the promotion of peace and unity in the country, while declaring open the March session of the lower house of parliament. Honorable Eno Tanjong urged parliamentarians to show proof of responsibility during the election of the new bureau and also during or in the course of deliberations. And this March sitting is the first ordinary session of the parliament for the year 2014. And as the March session of the National Assembly opened today in the nation's capital, parliamentarians would have as key subject the election of the new bureau. As I earlier indicated, the UPC party is demanding for a representation in the bureau, as Roland Akong reports.
MPs of the UPC party are demanding for a representation in the Bureau of the National Assembly.
And considering the vote of the Bureau of the National Assembly, our standing orders say that all parties represented in the National Assembly should participate in the Bureau of that National Assembly. And we UPC did not participate in the Bureau way back in October. So we expect to be there this March.
The election of a new bureau is one of the main issues on agenda during this session of the National Assembly. The SDF is demanding the application of the law on incompatibility and the application of Article 66 of the Constitution on the Declaration of Assets.
Of course, we expect this Article 66 to be implemented on Declaration of Assets if we need to continue fighting for corruption, against corruption, etc. We need also to make sure that senators and members of the National Assembly who are holding positions in state corporations and or other functions which are incompatible with the position of the senator or member of the National Assembly to hand over those positions, because there are thousands, there are millions of Cameroonians out there who need those positions. You cannot be Secretary General in the ministry and you are a senator or you are a parliamentarian. You cannot be board chairperson of parastatals of the state and you are a parliamentarian. It is incompatible.
Honorable Pangmashi Roland is more concerned about the fight against poverty in Cameroon.
I think I would very much want each and everybody to do is to fight against poverty, which is the #1 enemy of man. And if that is done, it's going to be good and fine for everybody.
Opening the session in his capacity as eldest member of parliament, Honorable Eno Tanjong called for tolerance and mutual understanding among the MPs.
I was calling on the members of the House of Assembly, the Cameroon House to understand themselves, understand the issues which will come up during the debate.
The March session is situated within the context of the celebrations last month of the Golden Jubilee of Cameroon's unification in Buea.
Now, the eldest member of the Senate has called for teamwork and solidarity as well amongst both houses of the parliament. The call came following an in-house tussle during the November session of the parliament when senators refused to defend their budget of the year or of the lower house. And Senator Fon V.E. Mukete was speaking while opening the March session as well of the Senate. We shall be coming back to that in our subsequent newscast. Now we talk about a fatal road accident which occurred today in the early hours of this morning in the southwest region of Cameroon, where one person died in the said ghastly road accident which occurred that was along the Tiko Miselele road. The 64-year-old victim and retired worker of CDC was on his bike with his son and was suddenly hit by a CDC passenger bus. The man who was on his way to Miselele was crushed on the head, but his son succeeded, fortunately, to jump out of the motorbike. The deceased was, however, deposited at a nearby hospital mortuary. Now let's have an excerpt or an interview of one of the witnesses of the said road accident. He spoke to our correspondents in the southwest region.
When I got to my Camp 7, after Camp 7, I saw this CDC passenger truck coming. And soon after, I saw it left its side and was coming directly opposite me. And I started giving way. But before I realized anything, he had hit me and threw me far in the bush. And the impact was so hard that my vehicle had to turn and face the Tiko direction. He hit a Benzikin driver and killed the young man. Jumped from the Benzikin, and so he killed the father of the young man. The head was cut off, and so then vehicles were coming, and we started.
Let's talk about yet another road accident, but fortunately enough, no human life was lost. A driver cheated dead. That was few days ago at Etukebe, that's a neighborhood in the nation's capital, Yaoundé, after his vehicle fell off a valley. The accident caused enormous material damage, but no human life, as I indicated, was lost. Roland Akong has more.
This cab is pulled from a valley at the Iturukebe neighborhood in Yaoundé. The driver of the cab, with a plaster on the head, lost control Sunday night and landed into the valley. The wall of a house was damaged. A borehole well was also damaged. No human casualty reported. The driver sustained an injury on the head.
Je rends vraiment grâce à Dieu. Mon mari ne savait pas qu'il pouvait encore être en vie.
Inhabitants say this is the 7th time a vehicle is landing into the valley after losing control.
Vraiment, nous sommes fatigués. Ça, c'est le 7e cas qui arrive.
Comment on laisse des choses comme ça? Il devait avoir les garde-fous ici.
Residents are demanding the construction of speed brakes in the area to curb accidents.
Now, barely 2 weeks after the visit of the head of state to the southwest region of Cameroon, frequent power cuts has become the order of the day, especially in the southwest regional headquarters of Buea. The Munya community, which is most affected, is said to be a hideout for hoodlums. Derek Jato tells us more.
I know the plead for some mommy can give me the television. Well, me, I know myself. Me, the people them. And the man will take a television, prepare for fight me and my own gang then.
Mr. Chu Jovet is sending a strong signal to those who break into his house on the 8th of March and stole his flat screen television, a DVD player, and telephones. His story is familiar here in Quarter 8 of Upper Munya in Buea.
Blackouts also add more spices to the men of the underworld.
No doubt, while commissioning the new quarter head and his team into office, Mr. Elinge Njoke Paul, chairman of the Upper Munya Traditional Council, gave him the formula to handle criminal matters.
Any criminal who is living in his quarter, he's supposed to call him to order.
And the new head of Quarter 8, Mr. Njua Silvanus, is already having a strategy on his table.
I want to abolish all the rascality.
Mr. Samuel Mbwamafani was the bearer of the message from the Upper Munya chief, Chief Dr. Mulenge David.
A special message that I brought from the palace to the people was that the chief is behind them.
And the population is watching to see the new team right the wrongs of Q8.
Neri Jato there sending a report from the Southwest region. Now 120 detainees at the New Bell Central Prison that's here in the economic capital Douala gained their freedom today. They are amongst the 500 prisoners to benefit from the presidential clemency that was granted prisoners by the head of state on February 18, 2014. Pamela Ndukong has the details of the report. Let's come back to the report of Pamela Ndukong on some 120 detainees at the New Bell Central Prison here in the economic capital Douala that were released today. And as I indicated, they are amongst the 500 prisoners to benefit from the presidential clemency that was granted prisoners last February 18, 2014. Pamela Ndukong tells us more. And just to indicate that some 200 prisoners were today equally released at the Marua prison, Central Prison to be more specific, in the north region of Cameroon, the far north region of Cameroon rather. Now here in the economic capital Douala, the Minister of Defense has hailed the efforts made or that's been put in place by international communities to secure peace in Africa. Edgar Allen Mebengo equally admitted that there is growing need to combat insecurity, especially in the Central African sub-region. He was speaking in Douala today during the opening ceremony of a multinational training program for African armies for peace resolution. For Hansen Chanji tells us more.
Cases of escalating insecurity have continued to make headline news in some African countries, especially in the Central African sub-region. Insurgency and political instability calls for a need for security measures to be beefed up as nations continue to live at the mercy of terrorists and perpetrators of civil war.
L'environnement aujourd'hui, c'est des crises, des conflits.
Life today is full of crises, conflicts in Central Africa and almost everywhere, and the international community is galvanizing forces to fight this political, security and humanitarian crisis.
Politique, sécuritaire et humanitaire dans ces terres d'opération.
In order to fight this crisis, the United States has initiated a multinational program to train African armies towards crisis resolution.
Ability to address our mutual security interests and to mitigate existing and developing security risks.
1,400 armies are taking part, with 5,000 from Cameroon, a country which is at the center of this crisis with an overflow of Central African and Nigerian refugees. The terrorist activities of Boko Haram in northern Nigeria, as well as political instability in the Central African Republic, calls for greater measures to be implemented in order to secure Cameroonian borders and thus the security of Cameroonians. Transborder crime has become a thorn in the flesh of Cameroon, which has over 3,000 long land border with Nigeria to the west, Chad, Central African Republic to the east, Congo, Gabon, Equatorial Guinea to the south, and over 500 kilometers long maritime border with Nigeria and Equatorial Guinea in southwestern regions. There is therefore the growing need to combat crimes that emerge from these neighboring countries. The multinational training program for African armies, according to Cameroon's Minister for Defense, Edgar Allen Mebengo, will see the training of credible, disciplined and competent forces to resolve crises in African countries, especially in the Central African sub-region.
And now, since we are talking about insecurity in Cameroon and beyond, we take you right away to news out of Cameroon. Malaysian Inspector General of Police has said that there are possibilities that a Malaysian passenger jet that went missing, that was on Saturday last weekend, may have been hijacked or suffered from cases of sabotage, or that the passengers or crew members must have been suffering from psychological problems. Ka Abu Baku was speaking in a press conference he granted today in Malaysia to explain to family members the level at which investigations are being carried out. He revealed that certain Iranian 19-year-old boy is the author of the stolen passport, who was traveling illegally to Germany through Beijing, Amsterdam and then to Frankfurt. And police said that that family members should equally expect their worst. Members have so far already filed petitions, and the MH370 went missing last Saturday with 300 or 239 people on its way to Beijing. Now, let's have an excerpt of the press conference that took place today in Malaysia with CNN.
There may be somebody there on the flight who has bought huge sums of insurance, who wants the family to gain from it. Or somebody who has owed somebody so much money and, you know.
You think that's a genuine possibility?
Yeah, we are looking into all possibilities, I said. So we are studying all the profiles and the photographs, and as I said again, we are looking very closely at the video footage taken at the whole of KLIA from the 7 until the plane take off. So we are studying the behavioral pattern of all the passengers.
Out of Cameroon, and in relation to the missing jet in Malaysia, the search has continued for the missing passenger jet, with China putting in place 10 satellites. But there are fears that it may take days and even weeks for the plane to be discovered. Let's have more with Franz Venkat.
For the 4th day, the international search continues in the South China Sea. So far to no avail, so the search zone has been expanded to 100 nautical miles around the missing plane's last known location. And rescue teams are even searching the waters off Malaysia's west coast in case the plane turned back. Previous reports of a life raft and a suspected oil slick have turned out to be false leads.
They have confirmed that the oil are not from an aircraft. The oil analysis of the sample taken by the Maritime Enforcement Agency are not from an aircraft.
The Boeing 777 was carrying 239 people when it disappeared from radar screens. 2 of the passengers boarded with stolen passports, 1 Austrian, 1 Italian. Their one-way tickets were purchased last Thursday through this travel agency in Pattaya in Thailand. The Malaysian authorities quashed rumours that the pair appeared to be Asian.
And we looked at the footage of the video and the photograph. It is confirmed now that they are not Asian-looking males.
Malaysia insists all security protocols were followed, but Interpol says its database of 40 million stolen travel documents was not consulted. With so little solid information, the Malaysian authorities are not ruling out terrorism as a possible cause. But they say they're considering all explanations for the plane's disappearance until some wreckage is found.
A report there bringing us to the end of this segment of the news. Up next is Talking Point. Good evening to you once again, viewers. Hundreds of detainees in the country, in all the some of the 10 regions of the country, have so far benefited from the presidential clemency of February 18, 2014 that was granted prisoners by the head of state himself. But many prisoners would probably have to stay longer in jail than expected because they cannot pay their court charges. Our barrister tonight is going to be telling us what that means to prisoners that cannot benefit from the clemency that was granted them by the head of state. Good evening to you, Barrister Philip Nzikum. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you very much.
Now, you are a graduate from the London School of Economics. I should specify concerning some of those detainees that have not been able or that would not be able to benefit from the presidential clemency because they cannot pay their court charges. What's your reaction?
Well, I did human rights, and I think it's an absolute violation of their human rights because if you look at the grant of pardon, in our penal code, section 66, it talks about pardon. In our constitution, the presidential powers talk about clemency, same thing. But again, you know, the president always grants that on terms, legally speaking. But that just means conditions. What are the conditions? What has happened from all this saga is that you have 2 rich people who were suddenly taken out of prison one by the French authorities. A second, who was former Minister of Telecommunications, also seemed to have had the same treatment. what do we learn from this? It follows that every prisoner should follow the same pardon pattern. So I think that somebody who has stayed in prison, when they tell you there's a remission, in this case where somebody has a more than 15-year prison sentence, you just tell me how that person is going to have monies to pay. So I think that the test should be reasonableness. In law, we talk about a pardon or clemency being reasonable. I think if the terms of release was or is that the prisoner has to pay a fine, or I don't know what the conditions are, then it is unreasonable and therefore a violation of the same constitution that has given powers for the president to act in this manner.
So now the prisoners, you're therefore saying that they were supposed to go out without paying the charges?
It seems to me it is not reasonable if the President of the Republic, after consultation with the Judicial Council, now puts a condition.
If at all he did consult with the Judicial Council.
Well, I think the President is a legal mind. He will always do that in his own way, but I think he will always fulfill that condition. That is not the point. The point is I feel that that condition is not reasonable. And you just said during this news that 200 people have been released in Marwa, I think, or Garoua in the north.
With many more in the far north.
In the far north, which more. It seems to me there is no condition attached. But again, you find in the case of the Titus Ezwa and the other French guy who were released,
Michel Thierry Atangana.
It seems to me, I was reading rumors that 110 million francs was asked for the same court charges. And when the French intervened, they went out scot without paying those charges. So it seems to me in the north, if they are being released at that rate, and in Douala they are talking about charges, the president...
Not only in Douala, equally in Bafang, we had the same cases in the east region where detainees could not be liberated as a result of the non-payment of their court charges.
Yes, maybe there's a misinterpretation of what the president has done. So I think I've not looked
by the court superintendents.
In Yaoundé it was done, otherwise why were these people released if there were those terms, or as you say, conditions? Why were they released? Why is it that the rate of release in the far north is faster than the rate in all these other places? So I think that what should happen legally is the General State Council, what you call in the French, the Procureur General, should therefore consult with the other areas where these people are being released at such a rate, which seems to us there's no condition, so that it becomes a uniform exercise and that pardon is not being abused by people who feel that human rights can be abused, because it doesn't reflect well on this country.
Talking about the court charges, what do we mean by court charges?
Well, when you are released in prison, sometimes you have violated, your arrest warrants and things like that. Sometimes you have a few administrative charges. Sometimes you have, when there's a remission, or it all depends, you have to pay certain fines. That is what is called, those are the charges. But I don't think in this case, where you find a sort of disparity in the way the implementation of
I should equally note that even those who are most affected are low-income prisoners that barely have families that can help them pay these charges.
So I'm very sorry. I think when it comes in terms of the application of human rights, in the sense that this country has signed to that treaty, and again, if you look at the preamble of our constitution, you cannot violate human rights. So whether you are poor or rich, you have to be given those rights before you use them or not. But in this case, it seems to me it is rich man's justice, and it is inappropriate in this case. It should be uniform. Whether you are poor or rich, you should be granted a means to go out according to the terms of the clemency.
So what are you lawyers doing as far as this is concerned?
Well,
violation of human rights, non-respect of the country's penal code. What are legal minds doing?
Well, it's very interesting you say that. I had a case where an old man was jailed. I thought it was not justified. I was not the one handling the case from the very beginning. I advised the family for us to go to the President of the Republic and then put our case and ask for clemency. That was not done. Unfortunately, this guy died. And so my thoughts go to this person who I still feel very strongly was innocent. So as a lawyer, I will not talk for those who have voices, that is, those who are now alive and can shout for their to be heard. I will talk for those who have died, because do not forget that clemency also goes for people who were serving terms of imprisonment for beyond 15 years.
That died along the line.
And who can enjoy. I know people always say, but you've died, so what is happening here? I think as a human rights lawyer, when, I dabbled in human rights, and so I think I have a word to say in that direction. If somebody has died and was within that category, I think the family should do everything so that that sentence is wiped out, because it may affect the children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, especially in terms of political plurality, where people can always dig back to your family background. So even those who are dead should be, their family should look into that and see whether they should, go back to the head of the magistracy, which is the President of the Republic, and say, yes, you've done this, but we had a family member who died, unfortunately, cannot enjoy from it, is gone, but if you are worried about that, write and ask for clemency so that it's not affected, a certificate of non-conviction is not affected by this, and so you have a clean slate for him. You must have done that dead man a great favor.
So should it be the family to see into that?
Yes, of course, and your lawyer, if that was my client, unfortunately it was not still my client, I'll go back to the family.
It seems the government is not even aware of what should be done by people that were serving jail sentences or jail terms that died along the line and should have benefited from the clemency. It seems like...
Well, as I told you, to be frank, to be candid, I have not looked at it. I feel that if the president made enough consultation, those type of issues will be tackled. But again, you see, we have clients as lawyers. We live with them. Even if they are gone, our consciences are going to tell us whether this is right or wrong. And I think in this case, it is right for us to fight for the dead. And I think if we do that, that will also be a promotion of human rights. Not for the dead, but for the living who may in future benefit because our father or great-grandfather had a clean slate.
Now, I see you're talking so much about the issue of human rights. Remember how the officials or members of the Committee of Human Rights and Freedoms have so far been decrying detention conditions in Douala as well as in Cameroon as a whole, overcrowding as well as other ills. Now, with 500 detainees to be removed from the New Bell Central Prison that is so far hosting more than 3,000 prisoners, can we say that this is an end or a beginning of a solution to the problem of overcrowding at the prison?
No, I don't think so. I think I was lucky enough to have grown up in what you call the former West Cameroon. My father was a police officer, a high-ranking officer, especially when he was transferred to Bamenda. We lived near the prison yard in Bamenda. And a case in point is that I discovered at the time, very young, that they were very clean, they had uniforms. And I used to joke with my father. I used to ask my father, who is the prisoner, the guard or the prisoner? They were well fed, they were well dressed, they were very clean. And I think that what is disturbing in this country today is that we're sort of absorbed by these people called the Francophones, and they do not understand a thing. What they should do is do reformatory prisons. I was just doing these calculations when I was preparing for your program, and I said 20 million Cameroonians. You know, if you're going to compute that into 1 billion Africans, you need almost 100 times that amount of 20 million people to arrive at that figure, or maybe 50 times to be more accurate. What do we do? These 500 people, 3,000 people, divided by the 10 provinces, are Cameroonians who are going to live with us. So what we should do in Cameroon is make a reformatory system where you go to jail because you made a mistake, and you come out, you are more performant, and then we forgive you for what you have done. I think the system now is so oppressive, and I think it is, I can say this, all of us are prisoners in this country because we continued, the system is oppressing everybody. You have young people without jobs, you have people who cannot say a word, you have people embezzling 66 billion and are being put out of jail.
Without reimbursing the money that they have so far.
And so those are the questions. These are monies we can use to improve the jail system so that we have a reformatory system and this country will become a better place. And I think that is when we'll talk about celebrating the 50th anniversary.
Thank you so much, Barrister, for joining us tonight on Talking Point. We hope to have you some other time again.
I'm privileged. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your time, and to our viewers, we thank you so much for joining us in this edition of the Primetime Newscast on Equinox Television. Good evening to you, and have a wonderful stay in the company of our programs.